Right, so welcome to session 6, everyone. It's themed on Roman fibulae in Eastern and Southeastern Europe. Our first speaker will be Mojca Vomer-Gokovic, and she'll be speaking on the fibulae from Paratovio in northeastern Slovenia. So I don't know if I see her here. Again, can you see Mojca?
I'm sorry, she must be around here. I've seen her actually just a couple of minutes ago. Where did she go? She was just here. Michael Womer-Gokovic. Yeah, well, I think I've seen her just a couple of minutes ago. Well, she disappeared suddenly. Anyways, maybe should we proceed with the second one? Is that okay? Because Alka, I'm seeing Alka over there.
Yes, I am
ready to speak. Is that okay? Yeah. If she's ready to go, what do you think, Charlotte?
Yeah, sure. Alka, are you ready to go?
Yes, I am.
Yeah. Could you share your screen for us?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Both.
Thank you. Do you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see it.
No.
Yeah, I can see the screen. I think you just need to.
We do see your screen. Thank you.
Okay. Let's start. Thank you. The Roman collection of the Archaeological Museum of Istria includes small number of fibulae that represent all periods of Roman rule and products of various workshop centers, primarily relating to mining areas with a strong pre-Roman metallurgical tradition. The spring smooth-bow fibula follows pre-Roman Latin tradition associated with Roman soldiers, mainly in second half of the 1st century BC and in the first half of the 1st century AD, in provinces even longer. The basic concept of late Latin one-part fibula with a smooth bow implies the foot bent upwards and backwards, and the pin cast in the same piece with the body. The smooth bow fibula could be made in two pieces. One part smooth bow fibula with a spiral of 6 or 8 or more threads are far less represented than types with a smaller number of threads. Hinged fibula consist of two separately made parts, the body and the pin. The first fibula with a hinge mechanism are known as Alesia type. They were used almost exclusively by soldiers. Early hinged fibulae developed in type Aucisa in northern Italy and southern Gaul. Then their use ended. Two silver hinged fibulae with a triangular ribbon bow and with openwork decoration represent a transitional form into Aucisa type and belong to the end of the 1st century BC and beginning of the 1st century AD. A narrow rectilinear perforation in the middle of the bow appears on the Alesia fibulae from Gaul. The fibula with the V-shaped openwork has analogies in bronze fibula from Nin and silver fibula from Salona in Dalmatia. Early hinged fibulae from Italy and Western Alps, Alesia group 2 Chiusi subtype and Alesia type Gergovia variant 6 show the same V-shaped openwork. Aucisa fibulae are the most common Roman early imperial fibula type, represented in all parts of the empire, in all social strata. They were worn by soldiers as well as women, especially in northern Italy and Alpine regions from Augustus to Flavian's, where reflected the pre-Roman tradition of women's clothing. All Aucisa fibulae with a ribbon bow from Roman collection of the Archaeological Museum of Istria have a head plate with the circles on the sides. Finds of unfinished fibulae indicate Sisak in Pannonia as one of production centers of Aucisa fibulae with a ribbon bow and a pair of circular perforations on the head plate. Aucisa fibulae with a bow of semicircular section were used simultaneously with Aucisa fibulae with a ribbon bow at the end of the 1st century BC and during the 1st century AD. The same goes for fibulae with a bow of round section. Fibulae with a bow of round or semicircular section have a head plate with concave sides, representing a simpler variant of head plate with perforated circles. Fibula with the bow of rectangular section is a variant of Aucisa fibula of semicircular or circular section, attested in Dalmatia by silver and bronze specimens. Aucisa fibulae with bow of triangular section appeared approximately simultaneously but remained represented in a relatively smaller number. Finds in Magdalensberg testify to dating to the last quarter of the 1st century BC. Strongly profiled fibulae with a spring mechanism developed from late Latin fibulae in eastern Alpine region. Noricum was their homeland. For centuries it remained the center of their production. An important production center of strongly profiled fibulae is documented in Sisak, where one-part types Almgren 68 and 69 were made. Strongly profiled fibulae were used from the end of the 1st century BC to the first half of the 3rd century AD. Older forms have a headplate, which is missing from younger specimens. The on-part fibula, Almgren 70-73 variant A-B, with a wide headplate and the bow strongly bent inwards, shows the shape characteristic of the second half of the 1st and the beginning of the 2nd century. Fibula Almgren 68 shows the reduced headplate merged with the bow. In no distant Italy, numerous similar fibulae could be dated to the second half of the 1st century AD. Fibulae with reduced headplate, also equipped with holes in the foot for attaching chains and pendants, are documented in Sisak, Noricum, and on the Rhine-Limes. Magdalensberg was an important production center, where fibulae of transitional type Almgren 67, 68, and 68 were produced in the end of the 1st century BC and in the first half of the 1st century AD. In addition to Magdalensberg and its urban successor Virunum, Almgren 68 fibulae were made in Salzburg and in Sisak. The hollow pin catch was used to hang a chain that connected fibulae worn in pairs or to hang hoops with pendants. Fibula Almgren 70-73 variant E was used during the 1st and 2nd century AD, especially in the last third of the 1st century. In Friuli, these fibulae are represented by numerous and diverse specimens. Differences between products of various workshops are particularly noticeable in design of the knobs at the end of the foot and the pin catch. One of Noricum production centers was identified in Salzburg. One part strongly profiled Almgren 69 fibulae Udine variant with a head plate are distinguished by a flat rhomboid bow and was spread during the 1st century in Noricum, northern Italy, along the Limes and in Illyrian provinces. Lead model for making a fibula of transitional shape, Almgren 68-69 from Noric settlement Bedaium, testifies to Noric origin of the type Almgren 69. The large rectangular plate of the pin catch shows the later shape that occurs at the end of the 1st and lasts until the 3rd century AD. A strongly profiled fibula with a flat triangular bow and a very reduced head plate is a rare variant that can be dated to 2nd century AD, according to the shape of the bow and the pin catch. It resembles a fibula from Sisak and Salona in Dalmatia. The fibula with the head plate, short rhomboid bow, and a very large rectangular pin catch plate represents a later variant F of Almgren 70-73 type, dated to the second half of the 2nd century and the first half of the 3rd century AD, with possible prolonged use. Production of very similar fibula is documented in Salzburg. The two-part fibula with the trapezoidal foot had a hanging spiral holder and a head plate of reduced dimensions. Despite differences in shape of the foot and mechanism for moving the pin, it belongs to the group of strongly profiled Jobst 4F fibulae, spread especially in Danube region. The find at Magdalensberg confirms the appearance of the type in Augustus period. Finds of semi-finished fibulae confirm Salzburg as their production site in late 1st century and the first half of the 2nd century AD. Outside Noricum, finds of semi-finished products in Aquileia and in Napoca in Dacia indicate ways of expanding the production of Job's 4F fibulae. The pincer fibula belongs to the 2nd and 3rd century AD. Pincer fibulae made of two moving parts connected by a rivet most often occur in the eastern and northern provinces of the European part of the Roman Empire along the Limes, but also present in Italy in the entire Po Valley and in the Alpine valleys. Density of finds initiated the assumption of the Alps and northern Italy as the area from which the pincer fibulae originated. Judging by distribution and density of finds in Mysia, it is assumed also that their homeland could be in the Balkans, in the mining areas in northern part of the province of Dalmatia, but extremely scarce presence of pincer fibula in the interior of Dalmatia does not support this hypothesis. Specific construction that turns the head into functional miniature pincer or tweezers has aroused various interpretations. According to one view, the pincer had a practical, cosmetical, and medical purpose. Another interpretation gives the pincer a magical and symbolic role that puts the owner under the protection of Vulcan, the patron of metallurgy, blacksmiths, and foundries, whose attributes are pincer and the hammer. The pincer could also be associated with the cult of Sedatus, the pre-Roman god of Lactobici and Breuci tribes inhabiting the Sava River and its tributaries, which was especially worshipped in mining and metallurgical centers. Another assumption is made about the practical purpose of pincer fibulae, according to which they could denote members of professional metallurgical associations such as Ferrari, Fabri, Argentarii. Knee fibula are a characteristic of Eastern European provinces and could have a spring or hinge mechanism. They appear from the end of the 1st century to 4th century, especially along the Limes. The fibulae from Istria illustrate different mechanisms of knee fibulae with a hinge cylinder cast in one piece with the body, a cylinder made of another material of lead, or with a spiral inserted in the hanging hollow bracket. It is assumed that the hinged knee fibulae with the full cylinder originated in workshops of Upper Mysia, where their concentration was particularly high. The faceted fibula with a hinge mechanism in a cylinder is particularly common in Upper Mysia. It is assumed that knee fibula with faceted bow were made in Singidunum and Viminacium, perhaps in the mining area on Cosme, in second half of the 2nd and during the 3rd century AD. The two-part knee fibula with the hanging hollow spring holder and the distinct semicircular head plate belongs to Job's 13C type. The findings of semi-finished products testify to production in Salzburg. Plate fibulae differ from most fibulae by a ball covered with a plate, usually round, decorated in different ways. One of the most common ways was to insert enamel. They have been used in slightly altered forms throughout the imperial period and afterwards, and can be reliably dated only on the basis of the archaeological context. Plate fibula in Istria are generally rare. Tutulus fibula from necropolis of Burle was dated in grave in the 2nd-3rd century AD. The round plate fibula with an enameled blue and white chessboard was found in the same necropolis in the grave dated to 3rd-4th century. Crossbow fibula with a smooth bow and undecorated foot of an early type is a characteristic of the first half of the 4th century. It has polygonal bulbs. The findings of semi-finished crossbow fibulae indicate production in Sisak. Since gilded, fibula from necropolis of Burle represents a prominent status symbol. Crossbow fibulae were primarily tied to the army and used mainly to fasten the military command cloak. Buttons join fibula in the role of connecting element of the clothing parts. The button was rarely used in Roman clothing, but still existed. It was used individually or in pairs to fasten outerwear or parts of a leather belt. A button sewn to the outerwear could be made of bone, metal, mother of pearl, amber, and usually had a hollow sewing plate on the underside. Disc decorated with multicolored enamel is the only button in the Roman collection of the Archaeological Museum of Istria. A foot with a flat head characterizes the object as a button. The button was found in an unpublished tomb dated to the 1st century AD, in which there were no other metal finds that could be attributed to the belt set. The button could serve as a buckle for tying a belt with a leather strap or for hanging a leather pouch on a belt. An enameled button from the tomb in Minasium, dated with coin of Commodus, was fastened on a leather belt and represents an example how the button could be used. The round enameled button with the disc on the foot appears relatively rare and in almost unchanged form from the 1st to 3rd century AD throughout the Roman Empire. It was worn individually like a buckle. Due to the small number of finds, it is not possible to determine whether it relates to soldiers, civilians, or both. The fibulae from Istria were placed in the grave as a part of deceased costume independently of the funeral rite, while in town and suburbs were found as lost or discarded objects. 2 early hinged fibulae are made of silver, the rest of bronze. The largest number of fibulae date to the 1st and 2nd century AD, indicating the predominance of Aucissa and strongly profiled fibulae. While Aucissa fibulae were present in large numbers throughout the Roman Empire, strongly profiled fibulae originating from Noricum remained concentrated in the eastern Alpine area and neighboring regions, including Istria, for centuries. Most fibulae from Istria are characterized by typical features widespread in Noricum, northern Italy, Dalmatia, and Pannonia, but there are some exceptions. The faceted knee fibula with a hinge mechanism in a cylinder can be attributed to the workshops in Upper Mysia, while the tutulus fibula shows similarities with plate fibulae common along the Rhine lines. Fibulae made in mining areas of northeastern Alps had a great impact in Istria, thanks to the trade routes that delivered raw ore and finished products. The movements of military units, commanders, and civilians contributed to the diversity of fibulae. Thank you for your attention.
That's great. Thank you, Alka. If you want to remove the sharing of the screen, that would be great.
Just a minute.
That's great, thank you. I've noticed we have a few absent speakers, so I can see Sabina is in here, so we can move on to Sabina. She'll be talking about selected Roman and late Roman military fibulae from Albania, new insights of the presence of the Roman army and inclusion of the local population in the army. Sabina, are you okay to share your screen?
Just a moment, please. Working now.
Yes, we can see it.
Okay. But I can go to the bigger slides.
Yeah, when you did that, it just went blank. So we
so
can
now
still see.
If I leave it like this, it's okay.
Yeah, we can see you move between the slides, so that's fine.
Okay, I'm so sorry about this. I don't know what happened.
Okay.
First of all, thank you for the organizers to have accepted our proposals for this conference, which is organized in the honor of Mr. Bora. Fibulas are among the most small fine categories, since as clothing elements provide valuable information about fashion, influences, commerce, as well as the identity, gender, and status of their holders. On these grounds, they have been the subject in-depth studies in articles and corpuses in many countries, whereas in Albania are one of the less studied and published categories, besides some sporadically articles and/or brief notices in archaeological reports. This presentation deals with some Roman and late Roman fibula which originate from funerary contexts and demonstrates for the presence of Roman military or the inclusion of the local population in the Roman army. As we all know, Illyria during the Roman period was an integral part of the Roman Empire, and the material culture as well as other aspects of the life was strongly affected with the arrivals of the Romans, as were the fibulae. Fibulae in use during the archaic and Hellenistic period in Albania belonged mainly to the types known as Schnarfiben, lance-head type fibula or Illyrian fibula, fibula with spiralic resort, and different types. The influence of Rome started from the 2nd century BC onwards and was seen in different types of material culture, including fibula, and introducing new types such as aulesia, auciza, etc. The fibula taken in consideration in this presentation belongs to the categories of fibula found mainly in funerary contexts, such as derivative of aucizas, crossbow fibula, pelta fibula, discoidal, and other type of fibula. The first category of fibulas that will be taken in considerations are these 4 fibulas, which come mostly from funerary or possible funerary contexts, such as those from the south and the north of the country. The typology in question belongs to one of the derivatives of Auciza type, which finds similarities to Boyovich type 3, variant 2, Gentseva type 15, Petkovich type 9a or 10a, which is characterized by a similar morphology with the classical Auciza that presents larger dimensions and different variations of the foot. The fibula morphology is characterized by a flat ribbon semicircular bow that widens into a square section at the head, which finishes in a hinge with 2 round bulb extensions, where the spring was inserted. The arc, extending into a big trapezoidal front, ends in an elongated knob. The decor comprises incised lines, circles, and additional geometrical figures. It can be noticed that this type has derived from the classical Auciza, finding also other affinities with other earlier types of fibula, for example, Arlesia, or later types as Zagelfiben or Rusita, according to the trapezoidal foot. One of these fibula actually originates from the excavation of the cemetery of the ancient city of Zgardez, which is known as Albanopolis, located in the central part of Albania. The inventory of the grave consists of a fibula, a buckle, fragments of a belt, and a knife. This inventory suggests, especially the fibula, the buckle, the elements of the belt, and the knife, demonstrates that we are dealing with parts of the costume and arms of a military official. Particularly, the belt of Ringa Schnallen Singulum type was a characteristic of the costume of the 2nd century for the army officials, as it is noticed by the depictions on military statues and military-grade contexts. In fact, Zgardez or Albanopolis was a city mostly abandoned in the Middle Roman period, and the presence of a necropolis inside the surrounding walls and its inventory can suggest for the presence of a small army unit or part of the local population in service of the army in order to control the roads from the coast to the hinterlands due to the strategic position of the ancient city. Another fibula of the same type was found in a cemetery in the north of the country. The cemetery is actually was at the beginning was a tumulus, which was reused in the Roman period. Even in this time, the inventory of the graves suggests that we are dealing with part of a fibula that served for the military costume, as we can see from the knife and the other part of the material. The fibula of Burrell, which was found in a funerary context, demonstrates both the presence of a deceased with military connotations and a high status in order to be buried in the tumulus, which was used for the most notable persons of the community. Another fibula of the same type was found in Miraca near Elbasan, which is in the proximity of the famous Via Ignatia. The fibula was found in association with other artifacts such as knives, dolabras, machetes, spearheads, etc. It is assumed actually that these finds originate from a cemetery. The fibula of Miraca should have probably belonged to a military funerary context as suggested by the inventory. As mentioned before, the site of Miraca is situated near the Via Ignatia and where a series of castrum and road stations were constructed during the 3rd and 4th centuries AD as a result of the political crisis of the Roman Empire and in order to protect the road network from invasion of different barbarian tribes. The material culture of Niraka may suggest for the presence of a small castrum or a road station, even though architectural structures were not located. Therefore, a military grave makes sense with the location. We have the same situation from another cemetery found in Jorice in the northeast of the country, where the fibula, along with the other material culture such as the labras and spearheads, demonstrate that the fibula served as militaria. The typology of this derivative of Sisa finds the closest parallel, as mentioned before, with exemplars from Central Balkans, which inclines us to believe that most probably their center of production was localized in the Balkans around the 2nd, 3rd centuries AD. The study of the archaeological evidence, as we have seen, suggests for military affiliations, since in most of the cases, the fibula were found with other types of militaria, such as elements of the costume and arms. The utilization of this category of auxisa should probably be related to the new trends in the military costume, but we cannot totally deny the possibility that they were also in use by civilians, as was commonly the case for other military fibula during the Roman Empire. Another type of fibula that will be taken in consideration in this presentation is the famous crossbow fibula, which originates from funerary context, again from Albanopolis or Skardesh. The inventory of the grave, which contained a ceramic pot, a glass vessel, a crossbow fibula, a dolabra, suggests again for a military affiliation of the deceased. The crossbow fibula is preserved in good condition and can be defined as type Protal 34, Keller type 3, or Petkovich 34D. The fibula is made of bronze and is of a medium quality and might have belonged to an army official stationed at the fortress of Skardesh, as can be noticed from the associated inventory. The inventory, especially the labra located on the chest in the manner it would have been held in life, the knife used as a combat weapon, the pottery vessel, and the glass vessel that can be identified with a soldier's drink in service, seem to estimate further the military status of the deceased. The inventory of the grave of a grave found again in the tumulus of Burrell contained a crossbow fibula, a knife, and elements of a buckle of type propeller beschlage, with instruments known as propeller, which were widely used by the military. The inventory suggests again, with the fibula, of course, for a military status of a deceased. The grave was situated in a prehistoric tumulus, which was reused for high-ranked members of the community, such as those related to the military ranks. We have another context which is very similar to those discussed before, and that is a grave found in the vicinity of a late Roman fortress in the south of Albania, which had again a military fibula, a crossbow fibula, which was military as it was related by the inventory of the grave, which was mainly from the labras, axes, and spearheads. Military fibulas, crossbow fibulas, are also found all over Albania in the military castrum of Paleocastor, etc. They are common finds within the territory of all the country from the north to the south, and in Albania they date mainly from the 3rd to the 5th century. This type of fibulas, as we have seen in these cases, were usually carried by persons with military affiliations. Other fibulas which can be related to the militaria are the Zagian fibula or the fibula type Boma 47, the one here, which was found in the city of in the famous Roman colony of Dyrrhachium. The map of distribution of this type of fibulas is mostly along the Germanic lines and pure in the Danubian lines. But they were also found in the main cities which were close to the main roads, as were Dyrrhachium, and in most of the cases, this type of fibula is connected to the militaria. Also, the other context, which comes from the south of the country, has a discoidal fibula, of type Fugere 27E and the Zagenfibel, which in association in the funerary context suggests again about the military connotation of the deceased. The fibula taken in question were mostly part of a military costume, even though for the ausises and the crossbow fibula is known their utilization now by both sexes. The inventories of the funerary context demonstrated for their utilization mainly as militaria. It is difficult actually to confirm whether we are dealing with individuals of the local population in the service of the army or part of Roman's military unit placed in this size, as the archaeological and historical data in most cases are limited. Thus, the information provided from the fibulas is very interesting for further studies of the organization of the Roman army in the territory of ancient Albania, as this kind of studies are hardly or not at all explored in the country. Thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you, Sabina. If you want to remove the screen share, that would be great. Thank you. Do we have Chilo Soro? Yeah, we do. I think we do. So they'll be talking about Roman fibulae from the Municipium of Brigetio in Pannonia.
Okay, hello everybody, I'm here. I will share my presentation. Okay, firstly, I would like to thank the opportunity to be here as a lecturer. I'm a junior researcher from Hungary, so it's a great opportunity for me to be here. Okay, my presentation is about the 64 fibulae came from the territory of the Municipium in Brigetio. Firstly, I would like to say a few words about the archaeological site. Brigetio is one of the two largest settlements of Hungarian Pannonia, which is situated on the Danube limes. Brigetio has a threefold structure. It consisted of a legionary fortress, a military town, and a civil town. Cemeteries can be localized around the three parts. As you can see on 1992 to 2016, my operations were conducted in the civil town. In the Municipium, several strip houses, cellars, and a bakery, roads, valves, and cisterns were found, and structures of a bronze workshop and a glass workshop were also found. This map shows the remains of these constructions. Unfortunately, almost the half of the fibulae, namely 27 pieces, came from a surface soil or a section wall, or they were found at the excavation as stray finds. But fortunately, other pieces came from analyzable archaeological contexts. On this slide, I summarize the main points of my presentation. Firstly, I would like to list the main types and the quantity of the presented fibulae. After this, I would continue with the detailed typological classification. And the question of the fibula production in Brigetio can also be discussed because several semi-finished and waste fibulae were found in the Municipium. In the end, I'm going to present the chronological information. Okay, this table shows the main types of fibulae. As we can see, fibulae from the civil town can be classified into 15 types. Fortunately, only 3 fragmented pieces cannot be defined. In general, a few information can be summarized. Almost all pieces were made of copper-based alloy. Only one object was made of iron. And it is very important to mention that the typical native fibula types of this region, like the Norico-Pannonian winged fibulae and the Norico-Pannonian double-buttoned fibulae, are not presented in this material. The first two types have a foreign origin, and they could come to this region in different ways. The first piece is a fibula with a flat bow and a sprung pin. And this fibula is a little bit stranger in this material because it connects to late latent forms. The second piece is a hinge pin bow fibula. Only one piece came from the excavated area and it can be well defined. On the fatly arched bow, a wavy line can be seen. The close analogies of this fibula are missing from Pannonia, but it is not surprising. Other early Roman hinged bow fibulae can more likely be found in the Western Roman provinces. These types probably reached Pannonia by soldiers or foreign civilians. Other types are most popular in this area. A great number of strongly profiled fibulae, Pannonian trumpet fibulae, and knee fibulae are known from Pannonia. So it is not special that a lot of fibulae of these types came from the municipium. According to the typologies of the region, they can be well classified. Only a few infrequent forms can be presented. Strongly profiled fibulae were made with or without a head plate. Out of the 5 fibulae, only one fragmented piece was made with a head plate. Based on the form of the bow and the dividing knob, the fragmented piece probably belongs to the variant 7073E. The other 4 fibulae certainly belong to 2 variants of the Ormgren 84. The distribution area of the last 2 variants is probably the same, but the number of the published analogies is very different. Fibulae of the second variant is less known. Yes, the group of Pannonian trumpet fibulae is more numerous. 9 pieces can be presented. All fibulae of this type are made without a head plate, and they can be classified into 4 variants. Unfortunately, one piece is very fragmented, so its definition is questionable. Let's see the first 2 variants. Originally, the first fibula had a big trumpet-shaped bow. Based on the dividing knob and the triangular shape of the following section, its typological definition can be easily made. Other pieces were made with a small trumpet-shaped bow. 2 variants can be distinguished. Both can be seen on this slide here. 6 fibulae belong to these variants, including finished, semi-finished, and waste products as well. Regarding the distribution area, I can say that this variant was very popular on the whole territory of Pannonia. A further small trumpet-headed piece is found in the municipium. On the edge of its bow, a small cut can be seen, and its ring-shaped, segmented dividing knob also has a characteristic shape. The last variant has a big trumpet-shaped bow. Another distinguishable characteristic is the segmentation of this section, meaning that the lower and the upper parts of the bow join to the dividing knob. One waist fibula can be presented here. It's interesting because it has a pin construction despite of the failed casting. It proves that this object was in actual use. The next type is the most numerous. 20 knee fibulae were found in the municipium. The pin construction of knee fibulae can be different, so I summarized the information about my objects. Most of the fibulae have a sprung pin construction, none of them has a hinge pin construction, and only 2 pieces have a sprung pin construction with a cover. Based on the main characteristics, 12 variants can be defined. The typologically sensitive characteristics are listed here, as you can see. Most of the knee fibulae of this archaeological site can be defined as mass products, but the decorated pieces and fibulae with special form can be presented in detail. Chase zigzag and wolf-tooth lines can be seen on 7 pieces, but the most adorning decoration type is the white metal covering. I present these fibulae on this slide. They belong to different variants, and white metal cover can be seen on various parts of the objects. Supposedly, the whole surface of the fibulae was covered. Some measures were made by a handheld X-ray fluorescence, The purpose was the detection of the covering material. According to the observed components, the covering was not silver, but tin. As I said before, a few infrequent forms can also be presented. The first one is the fibula in the upper left side. Based on its main parts, the fibula belongs to a previously defined category of municomerci, but its decoration is special and only a few analogies are known yet. Twin-knee fibulae are much better known. Different variants can be defined, and they were very popular in Pannonia. Two different twin-knee fibulae came from the territory of the civil town. The first fibula has a double bow, which have a rectangular cross-section. The second fibula is more interesting. Its bow is composed of two dolphin figures. Their analogies are mostly known from Pannonia, but they also appear in further territories. Finally, I would like to present here a unique form. You can see the fibula in the lower left corner. The form of this fibula is special. Its whole bow is segmented. Anchor-shaped fibulae were also made with sprung-pin construction. Only one piece is known from the municipium. Based on the main characteristics, its form can be well defined. It has a long rectangular headplate with knob decorations. Knob decoration can also be seen on the endings of the anchor-shaped bow and after the dividing knob. Only a few close analogies are known from Pannonia and the neighboring provinces. I would like to continue the presentation with further arch fibula forms. Predominantly, the wearers of the following types were not the local Romanized civilians, but soldiers or habitants beside the Roman limes. Based on the frequent appearance of fork-shaped fibulae on the limes area, they were mainly used by soldiers. In the municipium of Brigetio, one piece was found. Fibulae with returned foot were very popular in the Berbericum, but they also appeared in the provinces of the Danube area. Only one piece is known from the municipium. Despite its two-piece construction, this fibula belongs to the so-called Berberian type. T-fibulae can be manufactured with sprung pin or hinge pin as well. Firstly, I will present the T-fibulae with sprung pin. Only one piece was made of iron. It is a very fragmented object, but it could supposedly be a T-fibula with a sprung pin. The form of two copper-based alloy fibulae could be well analyzed. One of them is a so-called Sarmatian fibula. Another fragmented fibula can also be seen on this slide, and according to its close analogy from Hungary, the original form of this piece can be reconstructed. T-fibulae with hinge pin could be found in great number on the limes of the Rhine and the Danube. Various forms of this type can be found on most parts of the Roman Empire. 8 fibulae belong to this type. Based on the small differences, these fibulae can be classified into 8 variants. From the Roman provinces, their close analogies are known in various numbers. In the end, I should mention the iron knob fibulae. Unfortunately, no intact pieces are known. According to the 4 knobs, the early form of the type could appear at this archaeological site. In the Roman age, these fibulae were manufactured with various decoration types. The first fibula is a so-called tutulus fibula. Its surface is decorated with a knob and casted pearl ornament. In the Roman provinces, tutulus fibulae were very popular, but an exact analogy of this object is not known. I can present a few similar pieces from Pannonia. The second disc fibula has a very decorative surface. Originally, 9 black glass inlay and a thin metal sheet covered the disc-shaped bow. As far as I know, only a few similar pieces were found until today. I don't have all information about the color of the glass inlays, but blue and green glass were certainly used. According to the published pictures, the inlays have identical shape. I have information about the pin construction of 3 pieces. The fibulae from Hungary, Austria, and France were sprung pin construction. Based on their quality and similarity, these fibulae were supposedly made in the same workshop. Only 4 anomaled fibulae were found during the long excavation period. All pieces have a different shape. 1 fibula with 2 axes of symmetry, 1 disc fibula, and 2 plate fibulae can be presented. Various colors of enamel can be observed. The first fibula fits into a new category of the enameled fibulae from Pannonia. Although analogies are not known from Pannonia, several fibulae can be mentioned from the Western Roman provinces. The list can be found in the archaeological database of artifacts. The disc fibula is decorated with a knob and enamel decoration in 2 rows. This form was very popular in the whole territory of the Roman Empire, and its close analogies are known and presented here. The star-shaped fibula has a unique form. In the middle of the surface, a round perforation can be seen. Star-shaped fibulae are known from scientific literature, but only one close analogy can be mentioned from Aust. Their form and size, plus the colors of the enamel, are very similar, so these objects have a strong connection. I suppose that they were manufactured at the same workshop. The last enameled fibula depicts a mixed sea creature. It is a well-known form in Western Europe, and some pieces can also be mentioned from Carnuntum and northeastern Pannonia. Analogous pieces are also listed in the archaeological database of artifact. The last form is represented by only 1 ring-shaped fibula. The ring is closed, and the rectangular projection is decorated with cut-out motifs. According to the measures of the handheld XRF, the surface of this fibula was covered with tin. Although equal ring fibulae are uncommon, this fibula has a close analogy from the cemetery of the legionary fortress. In the past and the present, the fibula production of Brigatio was the subject of several research. According to the clay mounds, model, semi-finished and waste fibulae, plus bronze waste, fibulae were manufactured at more than 1 part of Brigatio. I summarized the information in this table. The manufacturing of 6 types can be attested. Unfortunately, most of the finds are without exact finding spots, therefore a detailed chronology of the workshops by area cannot be made. However, 2 variants of Pannonian trumpet fibulae were certainly produced in the workshop of the civil town. These fibulae are useful for the dating of this workshop. The detailed chronological information is summarized on this slide. Overall, the fibulae from the Municipium date back to the 2nd, 3rd century. Most of the types can be dated by the scientific literature. Based on their context, this information can be complemented with further data. Samian verse and coins were useful for this investigation. Finally, I present the cited literature, and then I would like to thank you for your attention.
That's great. Thank you so much for giving your talk. That was really interesting. If you want to take your screen share off, that would be great.
Okay. Is it finished or?
It hasn't come off yet.
Okay, please help me.
Have you clicked the, the share screen button? Have you clicked that bit to disconnect it? I think if the next speaker shares that screen, that usually takes over the previous
I clicked the new share, but yes, that's not work. Resume share is not. I don't know.
Well, I can see.
Oh, okay, I see. Oh
yeah, you
sorry.
got it. Okay, thank
it
you.
was a big red button, but I didn't find it.
Oh, you got it now. I can see Moisha is now here.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hi.
Are you prepared to give your talk?
I have prepared my. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I have problems with my computer, so
Okay.
we cannot see each other. But I think we can share my. Is it now?
Yes. Now, if you, Egon, should we go to Moisha or should we continue?
Of course, Charlotte, if you would allow her, yes, we would love to hear her. Of course, no problem. As long as she opens up her PowerPoint, though, it's just a little bit problematic. It seems like. Can you maybe arrange your thing or your PowerPoint presentation? Because we already arranged some time for you to speak out. Actually, well, we can wait and just to see if this will work out. There you go.
Now?
Yeah, more or less. Perfect.
That's
so it came out. Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I must apologize, but with my computer I have many problems. Please. So I can make so. Is it better? Can you hear me?
Full screen, please.
Do you? Is it?
We can see it, but can you?
We can see it. Perfect. No problems.
So I can start with my lecture.
Yes, please.
Yes. I will speak about fibulae from Petovia in northeastern Slovenia. For the first, we can see where the Slovenia is, the Ptuj Petovia is in Slovenia. Petovia was in Roman time one of the biggest and the most developed Pannonian towns, with the seat of many state offices. The custom office was the most important one. Among the residents, there were many different people who brought various cultures and religion to the town. But the true growth of the town started at the end of the 1st century, after the army had withdrawn to the Danube and the town got the status of colony. The town began to develop of both river banks in a rather balanced way. Today, we distinguish 4 different town quarters. In Spodnja Hajdina, the quarter called Vicus Fortune was the seat of the customs Portorium Publici Lyrici. In Zgornji Breg was the quarter of town Vilas. On the left river bank, banners the castle and panorama hills. To the Grajena brook was the administrative quarter. East of the brook spread the craft quarter. From the 1st to the 5th century, Petovia and its surroundings had a reputation of the distinguished center of various craft production. Excavation in this area revealed mostly the remains of important workshops containing pottery and tile kilns. But beside those, there were also glaziers, stone cutters, and smiths' workshops, and a bronze foundry. There were produced items needed by the town and its inhabitants in their everyday life, but also goods that have been discovered in other bigger settlements and towns in the province of Pannonia. The craftsman quart was situated eastwards to the Grajena brook. The greatest number of workshops remains with potter and brick kilns was discovered in this area. Besides them, there were also other workshops, smith workshops and bronze foundry. Traces of various crafts were also found in other town quarters. bone carving in the administrative area of the town between the Panorama Hill and the Dravad River, glacier trade in Zgornji Breg, a foundry in Spodnja Hajdina. The potter trade was represented in all town quarters. Part of the townstone from the middle of the 2nd century pointed out the evidence for various blacksmiths' work. The rejected part of the inscription probably mentioned the father, whose handcraft symbols, hammer, anvil, plies, are depicted under the inscription. The find consisted of cast pots, proved that items were cast in bronze and in other metals as well. Besides tools and weapons, decorative elements and jewelry were made. Workshops for the production of various metal products have also been established in Vičava in Spodnja Hajdina, where judging by molds and semi-finished products, fibulae and almond fitting for the Noricum-Pannonian belt. Many trade products, including fibulae, spread with the process of Romanization in the expansion of trade in a very large area, sometimes covering the entire Roman Empire and beyond. Accordingly, the production of fibulae experienced a large scale of grew into a real serial production, which was able to supply the market with cheap products available to a wider range and customers. There is also a lot of archaeological evidence from the Slovenia area and neighboring areas about the production of some of the most widespread types of Roman fibula, such as strongly profiled fibula and Noric Pannonian fibula. In most cases, there are semi-finished products and foundry pots, less often fragments of molds. The semi-finished products show that only the rough shape of the fibula was cast in the mold, while individual parts of it when they subsequently finished and decorated. To simplify of manufacturing process, some types of fibula were switched from a one-piece hem to the two-piece hem with a bow and leg of the fibula cast separately from the fetter, which was subsequently attached to the arch finish.
Monica, are you able to change the slides as you speak?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Archaeological evidence for the production of Roman fibula of the Almgren 67, 68 and 236C species from Ptuj is kept by the Ptuj-Ormož Regional Museum. Archaeological traces of metallurgical activity associated with the making of fibula and other metal objects have been discovered in various parts of this important Pannonian Roman city. One of the most important discoveries related to the activity was documented in Spodnja Hajdina, where Roman workshops with small point providing the production of fibula in the 1st century AD were also exploring. This include fragments of molds, foundry pots, and semi-finished fibula. Strong traces of molten bronze are attached to the mouth and wall of some foundry pots. The remains of the construction phases were discovered in 1978 in Spodnja Hajdina. The oldest construction phase in the remains of wooden architecture with two vast pits and a workshop of bronze products with fireplaces, foundry pots, fragments of clay molds and for Almgren 68 fibulae. Strong traces of molten bronze are attached to the mouth and walls of the pots. Numerous bronze and semi-finished products were also found, including half-made fibula in this type. The composition of the spiritual world of town was extremely varied. In Petovia, military crew, legionaries, custom officers, and other official and merchants worships in Mitraism, of which 5 temples have been found. During the excavation for the local sewage system in 2011, in the vicinity of the first Mitraeum in Spodnja Hajdina, some findings were brought to light that can be ascribed to the Mitra skulls. The most important among them is a bronze fibula. This found include a zoomorphic brooch, a fibula with a bow in the form of the fully plastic figure of the bronze jumping lion. These hindpaws of the lion were joined of the head of the brooch with a mechanism for coupling, and the forepaws continue with an elongated trapezial quadrilateral couch plate where the pin rests. The pin is attached to the hinge between the hindmost paws. The lion holds between the front paws and elongated tray decorated with parallel grooves. The bull's head is fixed on the fibula between lion's paws and by means of a rivet passing through a round opening.
Moisha,
Yeah.
we're still seeing the first slide.
The first?
Yeah, we're still seeing the first slide.
First slide.
Well, your slides do not really change. Could you maybe proceed with your slides, because we are now stuck on the first slide of your PowerPoint presentation. Is that possible for you to change it? Yeah. Well, you can maybe click on each slide. Is that possible for you to click on each slide and show them off to us? Is that okay?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, great. If you can. Thank you.
Is it better now?
Yes, we can see that now.
Is it better?
Yeah, we can see.
Can
When you
you
click
see?
onto it, yeah, we can see it now. Thank you.
It's
Great.
better.
Thank you very much for that. Great.
So the fibula with a bow in the form of a lion in the Slovenia area array. There are only 4 examples from Riechenberg in Branik, Most na Soči, and 2 from Savinja in Celje, which can be dated to the beginning of the 1st century. In Croatia, similar brooches were found on the site Novi Banovci and in Sisak, but without the bull's head. The addition of the bull's head to the fibula from Hajdina may be ascribed to the Mitraists and dated to the 2nd century, which is the lifetime of the first Mitraeum in that immediately vicinity. Animal fibula with a bow in the form of the lion holding a bull head with a paws can be related to rituals of the Mitraic cult. It must have belonged to a worshipper, most probably one of the wealthiest could be to Pater himself. The Roman Petovia had several burial sites at the entrances to the city. The most important, the western, it's number 1, and eastern, number 5, cemeteries are clearly demarked as they spread along the main road connecting the Danube region to Italy and following the ancient Amber Road. Other cemeteries are situated in town quarters. The cemetery at today's Gornik break number 4, is located in a larger area alongside the road that run from the Drava River to the west. Two different periods overlap here as the early burials are partly covered by a much larger late antiquity cemetery. The latest research works of the area around Breg Elementary School yield the whole network of 28 cremation and inhumation graves dating from 2nd to the 4th centuries. In cremation graves were the urns. Besides this, there are also plates, jugs, and oil lamps. Among fine goods, there are fibula made of bronze, a few iron nails and coins. The majority of inhumation graves were devoid of any graves goods. One of the few was a belt backed and pelta fibula in a shape of heart. The two-part bronze fibula on the pelta type in the perforated technique has the shape of a leaf. The spiral and in the protective sheet is partially preserved. The upper half of the fibula is semicircular and has two perforations in the shape of a kidney. An engraved corrugated strip runs along the edge. The leg is decorated with triangles at the edges. It ends with a wide profiled thickening with a notched decoration and the upper part and a cylindrical foot bottom. The needle is missing. Pelta fibula has not yet been found in the graves of Petovia, so this exhibit is all the more interesting for our area. Perforated fibula are more common. This type of fibula occurs in the Pannonian area. Chronologically, the fibulae of this type can be placed at the end of the 2nd century or in the first half of the 3rd century AD. And to conclude, undoubtedly, the most peculiar feature of Petovia was the cult of the noble nurses, Nutrices Augustae, depicted on the slabs of Pohorje marble, to whom temples located next to the Mitreums were dedicated in Petovia. The scenes of votive slabs represent a group of women. Among them, a wet nurse is depicted. She is sitting on the comfortable armchair with a baby and in her bosom. The women are wearing long dresses tied together with fibulas, stoles, and other jewelry. A wet nurse was supposed to have a special status in Petovia society because the only evidence can be found in votive slabs. So thank you for your attention. I hope I speak good enough so that you can correctly hear. I have problem with my voice, so I hope you hear something about our fibulas.
That's great. Thank you so much. I heard you perfectly, so there's no problems there. And if you want to remove your screen share. Great, thank you.
Okay.
So our next speaker will be Vlad Andrei Lazarescu. He'll be talking about conflict, diplomacy, commerce, and/or mobility, as highlighted on the study of crossbow brooches in the Barbacarium north of the Lower Danube. That's great. You've prepared yourself already. I don't even need to tell you what to say.
Can you hear me? Is everything okay?
That's great. We can see that. Yeah.
I don't know if you can see the presentation because I have multiple screens, but if not.
Oh, we can see the presentation. It's there.
Yes,
yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Let's see. Does it work now?
Yeah,
Yes.
it's all working.
Full screen? Does it change, or because I
It's
can,
not on full screen at the moment, if that's what you want to do.
yeah, I want it to be on full screen. Let's,
But you can go to slideshow at the top.
no, I know that, but
Oh, okay.
is it now?
No.
No, because on my computer it is.
Okay.
Let's try it now. Is it full screen now?
No.
No,
No.
that's not great. Okay, let's try it once more. Can you see it now?
We can see it, but it's not full screen at the moment.
Let's try now. Is it full screen now?
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay, great. So sorry for this, and many thanks for having me. I sure hope I will be brief because we are already a bit late. After such a dramatic, I don't know, title, I sure hope that the content would be up to the to the title. But when we deal with such finds, and I would especially like to thank Thomas Schiel for setting up the theoretical framework for this presentation as well, I try to understand things and look at this famous quote of Donald Rumsfeld that there are no knowns, things we know, known unknowns and unknown unknowns. So it's quite difficult to understand. I don't know if he really understood it back then, but I think it applies to trying to understand the problem of identity connected with small finds, especially in Barbaricum, when you are kind of, I don't know, skating on thin ice. In terms of chronology, for this area, which is situated north of the lower Danube, we are speaking about the period of time between the withdrawal of the Roman administration from Dacia until the, let's say, dominance of the Hunnic Confederation. So between, let's say, the second half of or late 3rd century up until the first half of the 5th century. Mainly in Romania, up until the late 90s, the scholarly milieu used historic events in order to corroborate small finds and use them for chronology. But in the late 90s, as I said, Radu Harhoiu managed to set a regional chronology that goes hand in hand with the chronology in Barbaricum already established for the, let's say, Middle Danube area. In terms of historical inferences, we are in a period of conflicts between the late Roman Empire and the Barbaricum situated north of the Danube. Some of the events that are more interesting are the treaties between the Gothic federations and the Roman Empire, which also shape what happens north of the Danube. So everything that I'm going to present is in close connection with these historical events. In terms of typology, I don't want to insist very much. There are a lot of attempts, as you all know. I used Alan Swift's typology for consistency, being the newest typology. I particularly liked her stylistic approach and the way she tried to see if we can identify production centers and distribution networks based on style. The same approach was followed by other scholars as well. And for Romania, there's only one attempt so far made by Dana Paraschivei, but it's only a contextual one for the necropolis at Ibida. But the most interesting stuff starts to emerge when we are looking at the spatial distribution. This is the spatial distribution of the brooches, crossbow brooches from inside the late Roman Empire. But as you can see, there's a gap in data east of the, let's say, Middle Danube. This database was enriched by Thomas Schirl for the Barbaricum north of the western provinces, let's say, also with a Balkan perspective, but I wouldn't say it's very thorough, but for the moment it's good enough. But as you can see, there's an area that was still uncovered, meaning the Carpathian Basin, let's say, and the lower Danube region, that was started to be filled, especially for the Barbaricum, based on Dieter Quast's analysis. And this is an updated version. This is what we know so far. And as you can see, there are a lot of new information. From Romania, we know 313 items, but what is most interesting is that we have 21% of these items, of these crossbow brooches, are coming from Barbaricum, which is quite a large batch. And in terms of typology, they also follow the main events and in terms of chronology that I've mentioned before, these relations between and conflicts between the Roman Empire and the Goths. A few examples, there's no need to go over all the items, but when you are trying to understand something in terms of identity or what's really happened there, it's good to map brooches coming from different milieu that are actually markers. And in this particular case, I compared the silver semicircular headplate brooches that are well known in the Sant'Anna de Mureș-Cernahov milieu with the crossbow brooches, and interesting things emerged, especially regarding the intra-Carpathian area, so let's say Transylvania region, which stands as a crossroads between influences coming both from the eastern part of Barbaricum and also from western part of of Europe. After seeing this, I tried to compare the realities highlighted by the coins spread in this region, and found out that the main distribution patterns of, let's say, small change bronze coins goes very well hand in hand with what is happening inside the Carpathian Basin, or in Transylvania. It goes very well with what's happening outside the Carpathian Basin, so in the area inhabited by the Goths, let's say. And then I try to overlap in terms of these chronological stages the coins with the crossbow brooches and see if something new can be highlighted. So immediately after the withdrawal of the Roman administration, it seems that we have a quick inflow both of coinage and crossbow brooches coming probably from the west, as you can see on this map. A reality that during the middle of the 4th century changes a bit, in terms that we don't really have very good connections between the late Roman milieu and Barbaricum, a situation that would rapidly shift in the second half of the 4th century, and this is probably caused by the peace treaties signed between the late Roman Empire and the Goths. So this is easily highlighted, and this shift between what's happening outside the Carpathians and what's happening inside the Carpathian can easily be seen on this hotspot analysis of the finds. And you can see this shift from what's happening eastwards of the Carpathians towards the inner part of the Carpathians. This goes very well with what's happening with the situation of the settlements of the Sant'Anna de Mureș-Cernahov milieu that tend to shrink, they tend to disappear, and they tend to extend their influences towards the west. Also interesting is that there are no real nomadic influences and artifacts that can be linked with the Hunnic Empire inside Transylvania. I mean, there are finds that are in the same chronological stage, but not really linked with the Hunnic presence, like these short swords or the large bronze cauldrons that are typical for this steppe empire. Mapping all the items both of Germanic character or Eastern nomadic influence, we can determine that Transylvania actually worked as a turning point, as an area of in which influences coming from both directions actually merged, and we can expect to find here a new identity of people wearing different fashions or products highlighting different fashions. And I will just present a few case studies which I find interesting. Crossbow brooches coming from St. Anna de Mureș-Cernahov graves. And this is interesting because after the middle of the 4th century, the percentage of inhumations inside the St. Anna de Mureș-Cernahov culture tends to be greater, but in the same time, the graves in which crossbow brooches are found tend to be very traditional. So they are still using the former way of incineration that was typical to these Germanic tribes. And another site which is interesting is Ernei, recently found, where inside a, let's say, deviant burial, there were several artifacts placed there. What's interesting here is that we tried an object biographical and osteobiographical approach, and we found that this individual, who was between 20 years old or 34 years old, suffered multiple injuries, one of which was fatal. Its carbon-14 dating goes very well with the chronology of the crossbow brooch. Here it's in the second half of the 4th century, beginning of the 5th century. But what is interesting is that based on the stable isotope analysis, he was of local origin, and his diet was using mainly large fish that can be found in the Mureș River, which is in close vicinity of the site. So this opens new ways of approaching the question of migration, or how we can explain the presence of such crossbow brooches in Barbaricum. I would argue that if we were to say something more about the phenomena that we see here, we have to do a contextual analysis and try to speak for each funerary context in particular, instead of trying to set regional patterns first. We also have done the ancient DNA analysis, but unfortunately it's the only ancient DNA analysis we have in Romania for this chronological stage, so there's of no real use because we don't have anything to compare it with. But for the future prospects, I would say that for this territory, at least, we have to try to approach things in a statistical way and try to identify stilistical patterns that could lead to a better understanding of the distribution network of such crossbow brooches. And this should be coupled with the metallographic analysis that could also highlight some patterns in production, let's say. So instead of conclusions, coming back to the first quote, if originally I started with a few questions and I was thinking that I can give some answers, I'm now having more questions and almost no answers at this moment concerning the identity of the persons that are wearing this type of crossbow brooches, except some cases in which, based on the contextual analysis, we can say that they were probably mercenaries, as probably in the cases that I've shown. So thank you for your attention, and I sure hope you have questions for me later on.
Hi, Vlad, that's great. Thank you. And I like the illustrations that you left us with. I think we're going to go next to Radu Petku because I can't see the other speakers. Can you, Egan?
Charlotte, I think they came because I've seen two of them were just together and then they were just sort of, yeah, Aurel, I think Aurel is here, my impression. Aurel, are you there? Because he,
yes,
I just mailed him. Yeah,
Oh,
Aurel is there and then he's one of his colleagues. Yeah, hi, hello, welcome. Hello.
Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Let's see, it's okay? Can you see?
Yeah, that's great. We can see that.
Yes, well, I will present a small paper, let's say, named Enameled Brooches in the collection of our museum, practically. So, I will begin with a short introduction of our museum. The beginnings of the Museum of National History and Archaeology of Constanța are recorded in 1879 when the first museum collection was set up in Constanța County at the headquarters of the local prefecture. Some years later, in 1911, the institution acquired legal personality, undergoing a series of transformation. We can name in 1928, a few years later, 1937, which will culminate with a new organization in 1957, when the museum will occupy its own building that includes an exhibition, a restoration laboratory, and the library. A few years later, 20 years later, more precisely, on December 1977, the museum will move to an emblematic building in the city of Constanța, where it still operates today, acquiring since 2007 the status of a museum of national importance. You can see the building of the museum and their location: Romania, Dobrogea, Constanța. Next, the Dobrogea region, part of the former Meuse Inferior province, which includes also Constanța County. It is a depository of a rich ancient heritage from the Greek and Roman period. On the West Pontic coast, the Milesians and Dorians established colonies such as Histria, Tomis, and Calatis, which underwent an accelerated process of urban development during the Roman period. On the Danube line, a natural barrier against barbaricum, the forts and fortresses built or developed in the Roman period were part of the limes, a military structure established in the 1st century and developed in the next one. In the middle line of the province, for economic and military purposes, a series of centers have been consolidated, such as Tropeum Traiani, Urmetum, Bilbida or Libida, or Egisus. The archaeological team of the museum carry out systematical archaeological researches in these sites from the Roman period, namely Histria, Urmetum, Tropeum Traiani, Carstium, Capidava, Sacidava, along with numerous or in various, of course, preventive researches in the sites such as Tomis, Constanța, or Calatis, Mangalia. As a result of these researches, elements of urbanism, funerary areas, but also aspects of material and spiritual life have been documented over time. The museum's collection gradually increased, among them the one related to ornaments and implicitly to brooches. Most of the pieces in our museum's collection come from the funerary context as a result of research carried out in the necropolises of sites such as Tomis, Calatis, Capidava, Tropeum Traiani, Urmetum. Alongside them are the discoveries made in civilian settlements, but which often have an advanced stage of degradation. The best represented category is that of the brooches with onion heads, Zwiebelkopf fibule, all variants being covered. However, there are also half-disc fibulae and the P-shaped type digitated fibulae or tutulus plate fibulae. In recent years, archaeological research caused by infrastructure works, preventive research as well as accidental discoveries or those made by metal detectors have constantly increased this font. A fibula is a brooch or pin for fastening garments, typically over the right shoulder. But I suppose that all of you knows what is a fibula, and I will pass this slide. It's normal. Enamel is a natural form of quartz. I will present. We will start to present in this slide one of our pieces, and two more examples. Yes, and so. In simple terms, enameling involves a glass paste being applied to metal and then headed to fuse it to the surface. The finish of the enamel can be translucent or opaque depending on the temperature used to melt the glass. Higher temperatures result in a more transparent and durable enamel, while lower temperatures give a more opaque and fragile surface. To give enamel a particular color, a certain number of special colored components, pigments, and dyes have to be added. With these, almost any color can be achieved. I will pass to the next slide, and we start to present practically our main purpose to enameled brooches discovered in our country. So, the first one of them is a lozenge type, on rhomboid-shaped piece with four perforations on the long axis, the two ends being decorated with concentric circles. The central area is decorated with a rhomboid border, as well as a circle covered with antique enamel. The condition of fragmentary, the needle and bow are missing. Minor traces of vernal enamel are preserved in the central area. You can see the dimensions, the dating, place of discovery. The second one is enameled fibula turtle type. It's a strongly profiled piece, widened semicircular arch. The arch is divided into three rectangular registers, well determined by the deep groove. On either side of the three registers, the body of the brooch is grooved and the edge is strongly rounded. The central register still keeps traces of the ink inlay, representing the image of a flower or solar motif. The petals, or rays, are suggested by a triangular inlays with varnish and yellow paste. In the center, a stilized disc inlaid with the vernal paste completes the decor. The side registers were decorated identically with triangular inlays arranged facing each other. The state of preservation of the piece does not allow their visualization only in certain angles of illumination. The needle is missing too, and its entirety being present only in the area of the hinge. The needle holder, small and well contoured, is in turn decorated with a series of 12 parallel incisions. The date is the 2nd century, and you can see also the dimensions. The bow pieces were discovered in the south of the actual county, and let's say around the big center of the Tropeum Traiani. And we are some analogies from pieces discovered in this big center, Tropeum Traiani. Until now, such pieces discovered in the archaeological context from Dobroja are very rare. And for this reason, the close analogies are missing. However, we can mention a series of fortunate discoveries such as Tutulus fibul type at Capidava on the Danube bank, as well as 4 other pieces decorated with enamel discovered following the research carried out at Tropeum Traiani in sector C1 in a large domus type building. 3 belt fittings, they can be military items, and the seal capsule lid, a civil item. In the case of Tropeum Traiani, according to the authors, all 4 items belong typologically to the 2nd chronological phase of the enameled bronzes present in Roman Dacia, specific to the last decades of the 2nd century and the entire 3rd century century. Even so, they come from an archaeological context specific to the first half of the 4th century, likely its beginning. Possibly, the enameled appliques of the belt fittings had belonged to the military environment, like cavalry, auxiliary troops, and in addition, they may, on the other hand, have also a civil function, being fashionable in the civil environment until the first quarter of the 4th century. From the analysis of the discoveries made in the area of the Roman world, it is obvious that the highest chance of awarding for such pieces belong to the military environment. Analyzing the discovery position of the 2 pieces placed in the south of Dobruja, near the border with actually Bulgaria, we can take into account, as an hypothesis, the fact that the original owners could be among the soldiers stationed in the legionary camp of the Rostoro. In this situation, the hypothesis related to the mobility of these pieces would be tested, without excluding the fact that they were even in the possession of some veterans from the Claudia Legion who ended their military service. Unfortunately, the archaeological context is unclear and the data are insufficient for the moment, and the punctual archaeological research will shed more light on this subject. In conclusion, although the archaeological research is carried out by the teams of our institution cover a vast area, summing up military fortifications or civil settlements, but also the West Pontic cities, the enameled brooches represents rare pieces in the repertoires of the discoveries we made. Their low frequency in certain contexts is due above all to the fact that so far archaeological research conducted in this segment of the limes has only reached episodic levels dating back to the early Roman times, most of the investigating fortifications being overlapped by the phases of late Roman period. Parts of the military use, these types are marked by permanent mobility, being easy to transport by the owners. Last but not least, their quality and aesthetic aspect have always delighted beyond the direct functionality, and for this reason, we cannot exclude their use for a very long period beyond the period of clothing fashion. As we mentioned before, such pieces are still rare in the known archaeological contexts in the final segment of the Danube, and for this reason, we decide to signal the presence of these 2 pieces presented as a modest signal regarding this category of pieces in our area. And of course, thank you for your attention and your patience.
That's great. Thank you very much for that talk. I think we next have Radu Petke, who'll be talking on fibulae from the fortified settlement of Olmetum in Scythia.
Yes,
So,
hello.
Radu. Hello.
Everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, it's okay. So, you can see my slideshow?
Yes.
Yes, we do, Radu.
Okay, I will try to make it full screen. Okay, it's okay?
Yep.
Yeah, it's full screen.
Okay, so thank you very much, Professor Lafley. It's nice to be at your conference again. I hope that in the near future we will meet in Izmir again. So, because it's very late and this is the last presentation, I will try to be very, very quick. I will present some brooches from the fortified settlement at Olmetum in the province of Scythia. So the province of Scythia was part of Moesia Inferior, starting from the 86 AD up to the end of the 3rd century AD, and then became a self-sufficient province from the 3rd century AD to the 1st quarter of the 7th century AD. Olmetum was founded at first as a vicus. I will speak with this a little bit later, but you can see that it was It is found in the center of Dobruja, of the province of Scythia, Moesia. So it was a vicus until it was founded as a vicus in the 2nd century AD. One of the inscriptions found there at the end of the 19th century dated the vicus ulmetum in 140 AD. It was located at a very important intersection of Roman roads. So the most important one was the central road that came from Marciapolis to Zaldapa to Tropeum Traiani, Ulmetum, and head back to the Limes in the north to Noviodunum, where the Roman classis Flavia Moesica was headquartered, the Roman fleet. And once again, it was at the intersection of some provincial and regional roads that made the connection between the Black Sea, the Pontus Euxinus, and the Danubius fortress on the Limes. Why is Ulmetum interesting? Let me say like that. Because in Procopius de Caesarea, in his book De Edificis, from the 6th century AD, the fortification, the fortress of Ulmetum, is mentioned as one in the list that Emperor Justinian renovated. So, what is very interesting is that even Procopius said that when the Byzantine went there, they saw some barbarians that were staying there. So they beat them and they started to rebuild the old fortress. I will explain this a little bit later because it's very interesting that from the archaeological point of view, we found this stratigraphical gap in the inside of the fortress. So the first excavations were made there by Vasile Pârvan, which is the forefather of the modern archaeology in Romania, and he dug there 4 campaigns, which he also published them. So in the first 2 campaigns, he dug up the whole fortification system, and in the last 2 campaigns, he started to dig up inside of the fortress, where he found a Principia or a Praetorium. This is a very important building that he had found there. And then in 2004, after 19 years of break, a team of archaeologists from the National Museum in Constanța restarted the archaeological research at Ulmetum, which are until the present day going on. So why I'm saying that it's very important that the stratigraphical and the habitation layer at Ulmetum, you can see that N1 is the second half of the 6th century AD, and you can see between N1 and N2, the second half of the 5th century, we have this gap, the gap that also Justinian was talking about, which is very interesting. That for us was a very interesting thing to find from the archaeological point of view, to compare it with some ancient literary sources. And those 2 things were okay, were like Justinian, like Procopius said. And the oldest is N6, which is 2nd and 3rd century AD, which is the early Roman habitation level, the Vicus of Ulmetum. The Vicus was founded by Romans and Bessi, by Thracians, colonized from Thracia to Moesia. And you can see that alongside the Vicus, during the 4th century AD, there was a statio, a military station that was guarding the roads, was developed there. Okay, so for the earliest phases of Ulmetum, you can see that The vicus is with red, and the statio is in the left part of the vicus. Pantelimon is the modern name of the Romanian village, which is now covers a little bit of the site, but does not cover the fortress, like you can see it in this photo. This is the late Roman fortress from the 5th and 6th century AD. The fortress that Justinian rebuilt it, and the fortress that Procopius was mentioning about it. So it is very, very well known that in the 2nd century AD, like I said, the archaeological excavation in Ulmetum had revealed in recent years that the rural settlement founded after a massive process of Roman colonization of the early 2nd century AD evolved near a major station from the elaborated road system within the Moesia Inferior province. A series of inscriptions discovered during excavation carried out by Pârvan attested both civilians of the vicus, communities of Cives Romani and Bessi, and the presence of military elements, most likely in the connection with the road stations. The dwelling structures and the archaeological material dating to the 2nd and 4th century AD, found in the recent research, certified that coexistence between civilians and military factor, as well as between the local population of Thracian origin and the Roman colonizing elements. Why I'm saying this? Because the first fibula that I would like to present is a strongly profiled fibula of Eastern or Oriental type that is specific from the second half of the 1st century AD up to the first half of the 2nd century AD. So as you can see, it's very small in length, and it's very well connected with the local Getic pottery that we found it in the habitation layer. Another fibula that we found there, and I wanted to present it, it's Angren type 7, or so-called Sarmatian brooches, which is very interesting. Everybody I know, I'm thinking that knows about it. At first they were called Sarmatian, but they are also provided with the Germanic. They were also wear by the Germanic populations. So it is very interesting that this type of fibula in the area of Cherniahov culture on the former territory of the Soviet Union, it's dated from the 3rd century to the first half of the 4th century AD. As you can see, our fibula is not whole, but we found an identical analogy from Olbia in the north of Black Sea at Ambros. One of the most interesting fibulas that we found, that we discovered at Ulmetum, is the swastika-shaped fibula with horse-head decorations, which is typical for military environments. Why is so interesting? As you can see in lower right, the number 1 was found in Ulmetum, and the other 3 were found in Durostorum. It's a very interesting thing that this type of fibula appears in Dobrogea only at Durostorum and only at Ulmetum, at least from the publications. And while I was doing my research during my PhD, I noticed that it's a very similar with the Thracian Thracian silver artifacts that were dated from the 4th century, 3rd century before Christ. As you can see here in the maps, a very strong concentration along the Danube and in Dacia, and in the lower map you can see the concentration in nowadays territory of Bulgaria, and it was, until the article was published, it was a very big gap in Dobrogea. It's a very interesting thing. You can see that the fibula discovered in Ulmetum, it's in a very bad shape without the heads. Okay, so I've told you that there was a Roman military presence at Ulmetum. You can see that the swastika-shaped fibula is present there. Then the statio, the praetorium, the Principia, which was the main building of the statio, and we are thinking that the later fortification was built. The enclosure wall was built at the end of the 4th century AD, beginning of the 5th century AD, to enclose this praetorium. Here you can see some Roman military equipment, militaria, very small finds. Of course, the crossbow fibulae, like I will not mention this I will not speak about it a lot because Andrei he had a very good presentation, but I wanted to tell him that at Ulmetum we have at least 30 brooches. I counted for my study 25 brooches, but now there are at least 30 brooches. What is interesting that Purvan, at the beginning of the 20th century, when he was excavated there, he found also 9 brooches, but only this. We don't know if he found other types of brooches, but in his publication he published just 9 crossbow brooches. Unfortunately, Purvan made a museum there at the beginning of the 20th century, but in the First World War it was destroyed and it was looted, and the collection of the small finds, it was lost forever. What is very interesting at Ulmetum is that, like I said earlier, at the end of the 4th century, they started to build the enclosure wall. But who built it? This is the most important question, and I will show you. So we have an inscription that they are saying that the Lanciari Juniores military, the legion, was present there and built a portion of the wall. Pedatura militum Lanciarium Juniorum. Said that they were building a portion of the wall. As you can see, we had a very good luck to discover a lead weight. But it was indeed built by the Lanciari Juniorum, or it was built under the supervision of the Lanciari Juniorum with the help of the goats, like I will present now. Archaeological excavation in Ulmetum have revealed a number of important testimonies regarding the presence of the barbarian federati in Scythia. These discoveries are an important argument for postulating the presence of the Visigoths in the area of Ulmetum, perhaps since the time of Valens, but especially after the feudus concluded in 382 by the Emperor Theodosius, by which they were established as federati in the southern Danubian provinces. Also, their presence in Dobroja was caught at Tropeum Traiani. At Ulmetum, they are attested in an N4 habitation level, a layer that corresponds to the moment when the enclosure wall was built. One hypothesis leads us to consider that the fortification is built by then under the guidance of the supervision of the Roman administration. Archaeological research carried out in the perimeter of the fortress has brought to light several complexes attributed to the Santana de Mureș-Cerneahov, to the Germanic culture, as well as specific archaeological material. At this level, several deep dwellings were identified. Their inventory is extremely rich, among which we found many metal objects with a considerable number of tools and implements. Okay, so as you can see in the right, with the blue, it's the enclosure wall, and the small how do you say it, rectangular shape. They are the dwellings, and with the M, they are the tombs. It's a very interesting thing that something happened at Ulmetum during the construction of the enclosure wall, that this Germanic population, they buried inside of their huts, as you can see in these two examples here. So this is it. It's a very interesting thing to find tombs inside of the fortified settlement. I don't know what happened. One of the opinion was that maybe they were under siege and they couldn't go out, and they buried their dead under the floor and in the wall of their huts. It's very interesting that they are wearing a lot of fibulas, like I will show you. So in 2005, inside of the fortress, almost in the middle of the fortress, it was discovered this tomb, which had all of the objects that you can see on the screen, with two silver fibulas, the Germanic type brooches. So we have two semicircular fibulas, two silver brooches, and it's a very interesting thing that we have some iron brooches specific to the military environment of the Feudorati. This one was discovered in tomb 12, the one that I've showed you a little bit earlier. Another interesting thing is that as we come to our days, let's say like that, it's N2, which is second half of the 5th century AD, almost the end of the 5th century AD, which corresponds with a destruction layer probably made by the Huns. And we have two types of fibula, which are very important. The two types of brooches, which are Vyshkov and the Levice Prišla, probably attested the presence of the Ostrogoths or the Alans Federati established in Scythia by the Emperor Marcianus after the disappearance of the Hun Confederation under the Attila's leadership. It should be noted that in the traditional clothing style of the Germanic population, especially the eastern branch, the Ostrogoths, the Vyshkov type of brooches were part of a woman's costume accessories. This is a strong argument that convinced the Germanic population at Ulmetum, at least for a short time, in the 5th century AD. The presence of the Gothic Federati at Ulmetum in two stages, in the 4th century and in the 5th century, but especially in Scythia, suggests the spectacular historical events in the lower Danube basin from the late Roman period. The spatio-temporal dynamism was highlighted by the Great Migrations, which left important archaeological testimonies regarding the material culture in this area. The natural barrier of the lower Danube meant a demarcation more or less symbolic between the ancient Mediterranean civilization and the barbaric world. And at last, the last but not the least, we are in the second half of the 6th century AD, when Justinian came and rebuilt or renovated more or less the fortress. Here you can see some specific material from that time. And of course, the specific type of fibula, the fibula with bent stern or the cast fibula with bent stern. The two types of fibula are a phenomenon of the 6th century AD, which originated in the region of the Balkan Peninsula, later spreading to the other provinces with the political military events of the time. It can be said that they are a fashion of the time, most being worn in the second half of the 6th century AD. discovered in various contexts, archaeological contexts, environments, and contexts such as military fortifications, civil settlements, and necropolis. The fibula were not strictly military accessories, they were also worn by the civil population. Here you can see a map of the distribution in the Balkans and in north of the Danube of the fibula with bandstern. From the catalog 1.5, and the number 3, it's made from iron, which it's quite rare. Thank you very much for your attention. In the conclusion, it's very interesting that a small fortress, which is up to 4 hectares big, has this variety of fibulas. Now we have more than 60 fibulas. As you can see, they are from the 2nd century up to the 6th century AD, and they are combined with barbaric fibulas, with Germanic fibulas, with military fibulas. It's very interesting, the one in the swastika shape with horses decoration that you can find also at Durostorum and only at Ulmetum. And okay, not because it's very late. Thank you very much.
Well, Radu, thank you very much for this amazing contribution, from which we learned a lot, actually. Also, thank you for participating, and also thank you for your energy that you just waited until so long so that you will take place in the conference. It was nice to see you after so many years also.
Yes.
First of all, I would like to apologize because Charlotte should have been leave, and that's the reason why I just have undertaken the responsibility for chairing or closing the session. But before we close, should we maybe do a very short part for discussions, starting with Alka's paper, Alka Staric paper on Roman fibulae and a bottom from the Archaeological Museum of Istra in Croatia. If she's still here. Oh yeah, there we go. Alka is just next to me. I'm blind. Should we maybe do a short session for discussion? Do you guys have any question, or are we too tight for that? If any question, please raise the hand.
I wanted to make a commentary only.
Yes, please, Romana. Please go ahead.
About the lion brooch from Poetovio. This kind of brooches are from Gaul, from Gallia. Very, very important there. The origin is there. I wanted only remember that. I don't know. I'm sure that he know that these things about. It's very interesting. Some this kind of brooches in this area to find in this area. It was only that.
It was comment for Mojca Vomer Gojkovic.
Yes, Alka, what would you say? Romana says the origin of this fibula should be from
yes,
Gallia.
I said that's not my relation. That was a relation of Mojca Vomer Gojkovic.
Okay, got you. The other people. Okay, thank you very much. Yes. Okay, and if there is no question for Alka's paper, let me just ask about Zabina Veseli's paper on the Albanian military fibulae. Zabina, are you still there? Did Zabina already?
Yes, I'm still here.
Oh, she's there. Yeah, hi, Zabina.
Hi.
We're all too tired for questions, but discussions are must for scientific conferences. Is there any question for this lecture? This was an amazing lecture. I love Albanian archaeology, and yeah, I learned a lot from you. Thank you for this. So there is no question for Zabina. This is the case. So let me just go back to the lecture of our young colleague, Chisila Sora from Budapest, and her amazing paper on the Hungarian fibula. Yes, Sorin, please.
So, first of all, I want a little to say about the young generation. Here is Cilla Șaru, Vlad Văzărescu, Radu Petcu. So we can say after Ilona Kovric, Patek, Merzi Monica, Shea, we have another good specialist for brooches in Hungary. Also in Romania, after Dorin Popescu, Diaconu, I can see the new generation, Vlad Văzărescu, Radu, that I am very glad because this seems that the brooches, the study of brooches in this country are not dead and they continue to a big level, more big than our generation and with new techniques, with new thinking about the brooches. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes. So let me come back to the other paper, Micah Womer's paper, because she came a little bit late, so that we just sort of change her schedule. She's still here. Is there any question for Michael's paper about fibulae from Potovia in northeastern part of Slovenia? Very interesting landscape, actually. Any question, any type of comments, or any additions or corrections or suggestions? So I think that we should just pass this by and then get to Vlad Andrei's paper on conflict, diplomacy, commerce, and mobility. It's a long title with lots of nice drawings, actually. And reconstructions. Is there any comments about his paper? Very interesting paper, actually.
Oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, please, Rolf. Please.
Did I interrupt somebody? Yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah, I found some very important or very interesting for me crossover among the papers by Andrei Aurel and Radu. About who was using these fibulas, especially the crossbow fibulas. A couple of you mentioned mercenaries, mentioned auxiliaries. Who were these people? Where were they from? What were they doing?
So, can I answer or?
Yeah, please.
Okay, so at least from the Transylvanian perspective, as far as we know, and such brooches, when they are in funerary contexts, they come from male graves. The only, let's say, archaeological context in which we have stable isotopes show that the strontium levels coincide with the local population. So in the Rene case, we are sure that the person there, the male there, was local. Given his age of death, that was around 30 years old, and that he already suffered multiple force traumas associated with war, it's highly possible that he was, like, let's say, a mercenary, or that he went and did like his military service in the late Roman army and then came back with the fashion from the late Roman Empire back home. But this is a singular case in which we have all this analysis. The rest of the items are coming either from older collections or graves where we don't have such types of analysis. But I think this is the way we should approach things.
And I think that particular case really struck me because I think as studies progress, we're beginning to wonder whether the Great Migrations really occurred at all, whether there were even were any Great Migrations. That a lot of these migrating people seem to be staying pretty close to home, and so I was really happy to hear that because I know a lot of people will find that quite striking. Thank you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, good point, actually. Thank you for this contribution, Ralph. We appreciate it so much. Yeah. And how about the paper of Tiberio Putarnice and Aurel Mututolai, colleagues from Constanza on the, and Zimina Margareta Stan, as well as Maria Putarnice on the enabled fibulae from the National History and Archaeological Museum of Constanza. Any questions to our Romanian colleagues? Are they still there? I think they also left, I guess, because I don't see them anymore. And then we have a last paper. We had a last paper by Radu. I'm seeing Radu still there, energizing with his cat, of course.
Yes, sorry.
We discovered a new cat lover from Romania, like myself. Any questions about his amazing paper on the fibulae from the fortified settlement on Almeitum in Scythia? Is there any question, any comments about his paper? I learned also a lot from him, and also I was very happy to see the stratigraphic situation of a Romanian site. Actually, it's pretty similar to Black Sea area of Turkey. Actually, there are a lot to common actually between Romania and Turkey in terms of Black Sea archaeology. Yeah. Yeah, it seems there is no questions. Everybody is perfectly understood with everything. So I would like to thank to all the chairmen and chairwomen, of course, for their participation. You did a really good job, especially you, Ralph. Thank you very, very much for your support, for being with us, especially in this early in the morning in the US. We appreciate it so much. And also the rest of our colleagues. Angeliki, thank you so much, Evaristopoli, for being a part. That was really good. We are all a little bit tired because it's beginning of the summer and end of spring, and after COVID, we're all a little bit tired and a little bit strange time period. But we're still working for archaeology. We're still doing something for archaeology. So this is great. This is great to have you all. So I wish that you guys will be again here tomorrow early in the morning. I'm going to be starting at 9:30. I have a little bit things to do in Aiolis, in Küme. We have a field trip, unfortunately, early in the morning to Aiolis, to Küme and Marina, not far from Izmir. But Gülseren will be here around 9 o'clock. So she will be opening up the whole session. So I'll be joining you at around 10:30 or 11 or something. Please call me if anything happened wrongly. I will just try to help. So see you tomorrow, and thank you so much for participation to all of you. Have a great evening.
See you.
See you there.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Thanks, Ergun.